On the show today, I have Jack Cai. He has 3 world records for solving Rubik's Cubes whilst blindfolded. And as you might expect, he is pretty intelligent as an individual. He has a crazy work ethic and an impressive ability to focus. But he also has a remarkable growth mindset. And this episode is an absolute masterclass on how to develop resilience and enjoy challenges and to spot opportunities for success. We talk a lot about solving Rubik's Cubes, of course, but also about solving problems in life and achieving the goals that we aspire to. Jack is truly a remarkable individual that I've had the pleasure of getting to know this year. We've been giving each other advice and ideas on different things, and I'm so glad to finally get him on the show to share his brilliance with all of you. With that, enjoy the interview. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Jack Cai on the show, who has broken 3 Guinness World Records involving Rubik's Cubes, and they're all insane. The fastest speed to solve Rubik's Cube while blindfolded is just crazy hard. And then the one that's melted my brain is when you did like 29 Rubik's Cubes in a row, blindfolded the entire time with a maximum time of like an hour. Or was that not even a record? I don't even know that one was a record, but I watched the YouTube video and was like, how the hell did you do that?
Not national record, yeah. Not quite a world record, but yeah, national record.
Okay. So you still have 3 world records, but the one that's broken my brain is actually not even a record, which is even more mind-boggling. Anyway, a lot of mindset powers going on and just sort of an insane level of obsession to like actually reach those things. So we're excited to have you on the show. So welcome. I kind of like to start with a bit of an introduction. So if you were to look back and think about yourself when you were younger, is there anything about your story that you think was leading you to where you are today? Like what's the sort of the reasons behind what you've gone and done, do you think?
So I think like when I was younger, I was always interested in like playing like a lot of sort of like strategy games, just like anything that's like mind related. I think I was like, it's pretty good at like maths, at least in the early days of school. And I think one day my classmate, he brought his Rubik's Cube to school and he solved it in like 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I just learned how to solve it off of him, or rather he referred me to a YouTube tutorial. And then I just practice following the rules over the course of a week and then went to solve it. And I kind of used it as like a way to sort of procrastinate from school and get really good at it. And I think my parents that he was like, no, like put that away. That's like a distraction to your studies and like your future career. But now I literally make Rubik's Cube TikToks for work. So I guess that sort of became the opposite. So that was kind of funny.
Interesting. Did you ever have any other obsessions before that? I remember when I was a kid, I found like a 4-leaf clover and my mum said it was lucky. So I spent the next 2 days in the field finding 4-leaf clovers. And she was like, yes, it's not that lucky. And I'm like, Mum, I found 20. Yeah.
It must be very lucky then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I said
I
before, like
know,
a lot of
right?
like just sort of like flash games in general. I think I dabbled a bunch in like violin and all this stuff because my dad's a violin teacher as well. I used to have like this gaming YouTube channel, like I think a year before I started Rubik's Cube solving, and I was like one of the top players in the world of this I think tower defense game called Tower Defense 5 and I believe Tower Defense Battles. But then I accidentally deleted my YouTube channel for some reason, and then I sort of quit. So that was pretty depressing.
That's funny. Do you think you learned much during the building of the YouTube channel? Because I know people work super hard to try and do those things these days. And it's like an accidental, well, this is kind of fun. And you had like an audience and you're like, okay, if I obsess on things, I'll actually get rewarded. Or do you think it just like completely bounced off you as a concept at the time?
Yeah, I think it was just like, that was just kind of some sort of like obsession I had. And I saw the people like posting videos about it. So I was like, let me just try this as well. Because might as well. And then people were like, well, this guy's pretty good at what he does. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I just started posting one, just like, yeah, getting a lot of views and stuff. And I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. So
When you're at school, right, did you feel like you were just getting things faster than other people? Because I've had some friends that were like, I mean, I was clever, but I had some friends that just sort of, there was no point having the teacher in the room because they just couldn't speak as fast as they could learn things from the textbook and just be like super bored. And I have no idea how clever you are IQ wise, but I'm assuming that you're probably quite high.
thank you. I think like my mom noticed this a lot, and she always says it. Like, if I'm really interested in something, I'm gonna be really good at it. And if I am like not interested in something at all, I'm gonna be like terrible at it. And I think I've noticed that in school, especially towards like the later years in school. I just didn't really give much of a damn about the subject. I was kind of just trying to do like the minimum I needed in order to get into like whatever I wanted to do, which was like studying classical violin at university. So I think that's more dependent on like the violin playing ability rather than like the academic stuff. So I was kind of like half-assing it and like channeling all my friends and Rubik's Cube solving instead. So like maybe if I was interested, maybe it might be kind of like that where it's like I just do stuff on my own. And I do tend to just notice that I prefer doing the stuff on my own in general. Because it's like I could kind of control the way in which I learn things, get feedback, etc. faster versus like a group setting. But yeah, I think I had such moments maybe when I was younger, maybe in maths, perhaps. But I think later on I was just a bit more demotivated and just didn't really care that much.
Yeah, I was just wondering, not so much about like your intelligence level, but just in general, when people do things that are successful, is it because they've had a lot of success before and they just got used to the fact that when they try hard, they will succeed, versus some people are just sort of more taught that like they're just not given a growth mindset from young. Whereas like if you do succeed at quite a few things, people just sort of make you believe that you can succeed at things. And I think that can be really helpful.
Like with a lot of Asian parents, they just shoved me into a lot of extracurricular activities when I was younger. So like I did like karate for several years, swimming, like Kumo, just like some tutoring thing for like maths and English. So I feel like, and also it's just kind of like the values and morals like my parents had of this like, first generation immigrants coming to Australia with only a couple $100 in cash. And then seeing my dad sort of, not like I saw him that much, but he was like working a lot behind the scenes, like teaching violin to sort of keep the family up. I feel like just being in that sort of environment and also him taking me to all these activities where you sort of get rewarded based on like effort put in. I think just putting in hard work and getting a successful outcome, it feels like very intuitive to me. It's like, why wouldn't you want to do this? But I think there are some people maybe that haven't sort of internalized that so much. But I think now that I think about it, maybe it's because I didn't have as much of those experiences growing up. So I think that's why thinking sort of like maybe more long-term, this whole self-discipline, working towards a goal, be a successful thing, it feels just very intuitive to me, I think.
It's hard for me to really know how much of it was for myself, like how much was stuff that my parents taught me, because I definitely remember being told to like sit down and like just work hard for things that I wanted. And one time my friends were getting paid like per exam result that they got. Like if they got an A, they get like 50 quid or something. And I was like, hey parents, by the way, like my friends are getting paid. And then my dad stopped the car, just looked at me and was like, Sam, it's your life. If you want to do well, you'll work hard. And like in general, I got like a pound for mowing the lawn and things. And everything just sort of like, if I put in the work, I got the reward, and they always motivated me to go and do things. And it just sort of, but I don't know if I wanted to do those things anyway, because if I didn't want the pound, I just wouldn't have mowed the lawn anyway, and I would have just completely forgotten about it and played games kind of thing. So I don't know how much of it was me versus the way I was brought up. It's really hard to backtrack. But Asian parenting is definitely meant to be focused on working hard. Did you feel that you really noticed the difference between yourself and your friends in terms of like how you were brought up as with your parents?
I reckon so, yeah. I think this sort of like, the Asian culture sort of like, focus is like work hard. Well, my parents are a bit more maybe European, and like they grew up in a city that was more sort of westernized. So they had to do this kind of values that they're more sort of open with me. I mean, when it comes to like work and stuff, they want me to be happy. They don't care about me being doctor or lawyer necessarily, like the majority of Asian parents. They just want me to finish university. So like I'm pretty grateful for that sort of dynamic. Although they do definitely have a lot of sort of civilization, I think, values. But yeah, I think I do notice this definitely like, I don't know, some differences. Like, I don't know. Well, one thing I'm thinking about that, I didn't realize that much until like I started talking to other people, and also in this co-living space, is that like my family as a whole is like just very introverted. I didn't just realize that until I just go out and start talking to people. They like rarely ever go out to parties, leave the house or anything at all. But I feel like maybe that sort of ended up as like maybe an advantage in terms of like me focusing on a very individualistic task of solving a Rubik's Cube quickly. Violence kind of like that as well. Like yes, you perform in front of people and orchestras, etc. Like with I think a lot of task and skill mastery, a lot of the deliberate practice or like the way of practice in order to improve the task like the most efficiently is done in solitude. So I feel like that comes easily to me because it's, maybe that family dynamic and personality as well. I think I veer towards the introverted side, but like I could shift towards like the middle as well. And I think if you ask people on my co-living experience at the moment, they'd probably say I'm around the middle, even though I think naturally I went more that way. I think the environment can definitely sort of help you expand and see where you are in the whole sort of introvert extrovert scale.
It does shift. Like I did the Myers-Briggs thing, and when the first time I did it, I was like much higher on the introvert scale. And then like the last time I did it, I was like 51 introvert, 49 extrovert. And I do really need to talk to people and spend time doing things. I also really need to have time alone to restore. But like when I was younger, I definitely was more content being silent and by myself for very long periods of time than I am these days. And I don't know if this is a skill that I've acquired to become more extrovert or like a skill that I've lost to be able to be more introvert. It's who knows?
Oh, wow. That's, yeah, interesting. I've noticed a bit of that myself as well. Like I used to be like very high on introverted, like 90%. And then when I started going out and talking to more people after the quarantine, it shifted more towards like 51, 49, just like yourself. And then I think now it shifted back a tiny bit to like 60 or something. But maybe if I try it out again, because I'm in a co-living space with other people, I might just go back towards the extroverted side.
Part of it is I just got a lot better at talking and interacting with people that made it more enjoyable. So part of it was like maybe because I wasn't very good at it, it wasn't very fun. And I'd actually prefer to be alone because I had more fun inside my own brain than trying to talk to people and just getting stressed. Whereas now I'm like quite good at that. And so being time alone seems like a worse thing to do. Interesting to try and work out and where it's useful or not. Because I definitely think I've also got worse at like paying attention and doing things alone. Like certainly I used to love programming, but actually I find it quite lonely. And the bigger thing was actually when I'm thinking about jobs and stuff, I'm like, I don't think I want to be a programmer because I don't really want to spend lots of time just like battling with problems that no one gives a shit about. And like you can spend all week solving problems that are super hard and you share someone, no one gives a shit because if it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, and it's like, it's too isolating. Whereas some people just love programming to their core. And I'm like, okay, I really like it, but not that much.
That's so interesting. Because I was figuring out the Rubik's Cube, like, to the world, and it's like, I think for the most part, kind of like the violin, I think it's pretty sort of solitary. You're just practicing this by yourself, like, for the most part, and you don't really talk to people that much. But then people kind of go to competitions and then meet other people and socialize there. And yeah, so I think there's a bit of that element. And then when I started making content on social media, obviously there's a lot more people to talk to me there. So yeah, I mean, I guess technically, if you made some content on programming or something, then maybe that could expand things a bit. Yeah, I guess there are some activities that are a bit more inherently sort of, I guess, introverted, so to speak. Although you can sort of, I guess, maybe change things up depending on how much you want to talk to people and how much you don't want to talk.
And it depends with like creativity. Like if you paint paintings all day, but then burn them at the end of each day, it's very introvert because no one will ever get to see them. Whereas if you paint things by yourself, but you then show them to people, it's a very rewarding activity as an extrovert, perhaps, isn't it? You kind of get to spend time thinking about things, but you also think about how the person perceives it and then get the thing. Because I mean, with a Rubik's Cube, you get to show it to people and it's pretty like impressive, which is the point I'm guessing is to be better than other people. And so it's impressive. Or do you think that there was just most of it was just like the mental game with yourself, how quickly you could do it? Because if everybody could do it, do you think you'd ever bother doing it? Sorry, it's a super hard question to jump in there.
Oh, no. I like these questions. It makes things more interesting, yeah. Because like in Rubik's Cube solving, there's multiple different events for like different puzzles, different shapes and sizes. And I decided to focus on blindfolded solving. And I think part of the reason why was because there's this guy called Felix Zemdegs, and he's basically like the Roger Federer, like #1 absolute GOAT, like basically of the Rubik's Cube world. And just so happened to live in the exact same city as me. So I think in my mind, I was like, I have like zero chance of competing with this person, like playing his own game, just doing normal solving, because it's like breaking world record like every single competition. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try to look into something else. So I think like that's kind of how I pivoted towards like blindfolded solving in particular, because I think there was like less competition, easy to get a national record. I mean, not easy by any chance, but like I had a chance of doing something out of that. So that just bounces back to your question. Everyone's like, great at it, like would I sort of do it? Because I was thinking like perhaps I might even, try something else. Because in that, the real life scenario of me picking blindfolded solving over sided solving, I kind of partially did it because I think it was sort of like, I guess, easier to sort of get high up in the rankings or something, or like have a chance of doing something meaningful. And then if everyone was good at the whole Rubik's Cube thing, then maybe I might just pick something else entirely, or a different type of Rubik's Cube, and then focus on mastering that. I think the field I chose is some sort of like, I don't know, status arbitrage or something, and that I feel like I get all like sort of the benefits of just like breaking like the master record almost. But I guess my path towards breaking a record for blindfolded solving was easier because there's less competition. I just went for that instead. So I think I like to inherently think that, I'm completely just motivated by just like the joy of solving puzzles and stuff. But I do think there is a bit of that sort of external. Back then, I think there was more of a desire to achieve something I think meaningful, or like sort of make a name for myself, so to speak. There was that. But now that I've achieved that, it's like, I don't care about it as much.
Winding back, one thing that you said that is kind of amusing around, the concept of doing a Rubik's Cube blindfolded seems much harder than doing it without a blindfold. And yet you're saying, oh, well, it's obviously much easier to do the blindfolded version because you can actually succeed. And so I just love how clear that makes it that sometimes doing the harder thing is actually easier. Because like, yeah, life and business is sort of, if everything was easy, there wouldn't be any reward.
When I started off, the records for like blindfolded solving were like way slower than records for like just normal Rubik cube solving. Yeah, I think because it was interpreted as being sort of harder and maybe like less exciting and stuff. Because there's also like about sort of solving, like as you've seen, multiple Rubik cubes blindfolded and like bigger puzzles blindfolded, and those can be like sort of very tough because there's a very high chance of like failing, and you don't really get that maybe as much of an immediate sort of positive sort of dopamine sort of feedback loop compared to solving maybe the smaller, easier puzzles and like the normal 3x3. And so there's sort of like less competition. Because of that reason, it's easier to sort of break records in those events, get podiums and then wins because people avoid because it's difficult. So it's quite a fascinating paradox. I haven't thought of it that way.
It's like a big mental leap, as in like, if you're getting into solving Rubik's Cube, it's already hard to get fast at doing it. But then also try to become like basically like a memory champion and learn like those sort of techniques, like a whole nother thing. But trying to then combine the two is like a much more unknown thing to get to. And you're like, I'm trying to do a really hard thing plus another really hard thing all at once. It just seems much more likely to just be bad. And like, to practice getting faster with a Rubik's Cube, you can do it in like a minute and you just keep on doing it. You can do it in like 40 seconds or whatever, and you just slowly improve. Whereas I feel like trying to do it blindfolded, you'd spend so much time getting it wrong that it doesn't feel like you're improving, because you sort of put your blindfold on, not solve it, take your blindfold off, put your blindfold on, not solve it again, take it off. And you're like, oh, it's just that you're not getting any quicker. And
I think it's just like a lot harder like on yourself because you just feel like a lot more miserable. So yeah, that's so fascinating.
lots of things in life, as in, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if it was easy and everyone was instantly successful straight away, it wouldn't really be that rewarding because everyone would be doing it. And like, the only reason being an entrepreneur is rewarding and like having a big company is because it's actually fucking hard to make the next Airbnb. And it's really unlikely that you're actually going to do it, kind of thing. And so generally, like, if things are kind of hard, it's actually a really good sign that it's worth doing. It could also be a sign that it's just a complete stupid thing to do. But as a general rule, like, you're probably not going to have any kind of outweighed success without it being super hard because of it'll already have been done, which is a bit of a nice mental model. So yeah, cool. And I quite like your writing on the concept of the value of doing something unique that no one's ever done and being the best at something, because it is like a thing that people kind of want, but then they don't really think about logically. And they just want to be like the best on YouTube or something, where like you're never actually going to be the best. And actually trying to find sort of a niche that you can kind of own is much more logical.
Because I think I wanted to do something like that as well, like be the biggest YouTuber or something, at least for Rubik's Cube solving. And it's sort of funny because I'm actually friends with the best Rubik's Cube YouTuber with the most amount of subscribers, or like for 3 million like subscribers. And I've talked to him quite a lot to sort of like understand what he does, his work, and stuff. I was like, I don't want to do this. I feel like a lot of people and kids, they sort of dream of things pretty generally. And I think that's good, like starting out, and then maybe you can narrow things down by experimentation, which is what I'm doing basically. Like, I want to be a YouTuber, very common these days from what I've heard. I want to be a K-pop idol, I want to be X, Y, Z. But I think for like those broad categories, if you want to be like top, it's like, oh man, you got to work your ass like way more than I did for my record, I reckon. Even though maybe some people might say it's something harder, but what's going to less competition because not everyone wants to be a world record holder in blindfold Rubik's Cube solving.
One, you got to work crazy hard, but two, you might never succeed. Like, very, very likely that you'll never succeed and you'll just be a failure. Or three, you just got to have like a shitload of inside contacts. It's sort of much harder. I mean, I've interviewed a few Olympians, and like, they give up so many years of their life to get to the point where like actually they're 30 and they still haven't succeeded at anything. And they've just been like super driven, earning like basically no money, just exercising all day, which actually, if they really love that, it's okay. But many people reach the end of their Olympic career and they're actually basically just a failure, because everyone wants to win the Olympics, but like only one person can. Whereas if you're doing something like more unique, you have like a much higher chance of being the best at something. But it's still super hard. You have to like just win the genetic lottery and have the best coach available and put all the right years and be in the right place at the right time to do all the right practice. And it's insane. So yeah, they're massive gambling as well as just like dedicating your life to something, which is weird.
It's sort of interesting because I feel like, I'm sort of lucky to be sort of always on the other side, where I've kind of gotten the success a lot earlier when I was like 20 years old. And then another sort of problem that came out of that, and I was like, I feel like I've achieved like the best amount in the world at this specific thing. And it's almost a sense of, I'm never going to do anything like this ever again. So then I think I've been spending the past couple of years of my life going like, what the hell do I do now? So it's like, I just been dabbling in a bunch of sort of other activities. And then, I think initially I had this as like, I want to be super good at this, like world battle, almost like that. Older, I kind of realized that's obviously unrealistic because you want to be the best sort of dance or best XYZ. Like usually I start like a bit younger. Even at the Rubik's Cube world, like I think the world record hold is like 9 years old. He started when he was like 5. So it's like interesting. They're getting younger and younger.
There was the guy that was like the chess grandmaster, then he went into like kickboxing or jiu-jitsu or something for 10 years, and then after that he's now doing like big wave surfing. He's now like in his 40s or 50s or something. It is possible to go and do stuff and be like extra super good at it, but now that you've done it, does it matter that much to you to be the best at something, or can you just do something that's like actually fun? Because of, in the same way, like trying to be the best on YouTube, like people want to be like a billionaire or something, and it's really unrealistic to compare yourself to like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg that got lucky super early and just did something super huge, when actually most people are never going to get any happier than you'd be if you had like $10 million or pounds, whatever, because there's not much you can do besides have one nice house and another nice house somewhere else and be able to pay for anything you need to do. And after that, like, it's not mentally that much better having like lots of money, but it is a shitload of concern, and you have a lot more issues to deal with. You have like the potential of your money getting lost at any point in time or stolen, and you have like a lot more stress getting there. And it's nicer to actually chill out at like the lower level, like other things that you can do that you just enjoy and can be curious and obsessed with that don't require success. Is not to be negative and say like don't try hard. Is one thought, and two, like, was winning that good, and how did it feel? They're two very different questions, although I guess they're kind of related.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sort of wasn't like, I guess, the way which I expected it, because I think all 3 world records, they all came like when I least expected it. The first one, like, the scramble wasn't even like that good, but I just happened to know a couple of techniques to make it faster. And to me, it felt like 2 seconds slower than the crumble record. But then I heard my blindfold, I was like, oh, that's it almost. So I think it was more of a chiller sort of reaction. I was kind of holding it together because I was actually aiming for the different world record category, which is the average of 3 solves, because every round you get to do 3 solves with the cube, and then the average those out, and then the average time is also another category. But I broke the fastest time to solve it just a single time on the first solve. So I hadn't tried to hold it together for the other 2. I think the second record where I did break the average record I was talking about, it was just kind of like a strange, almost like, oh, I've done it now. So I was like, now what? And then the third record was interesting as well, because that was like when I kind of stopped working towards those records, because I already broke the single and average record. So it's like, I think I shifted my focus towards solving multiple Rubik's Cubes blindfolded, which we talked about before. But just some out of the blue, I just randomly broke it, even though I barely practiced out of it anymore. And it was but I repped it the most to the last one, because I just happened to break it by 0.01 seconds. I didn't really work for this almost, and it's like almost a lucky sort of lottery winner kind of thing.
Do you think that actually training to do 30 solves in a row whilst blindfolded is actually really good training to get faster at doing the single solves? Because I feel like trying to like make your brain be able to do something that's like way harder makes the easier thing easier. Like trying to go running with a 20-kilo backpack, and then you go running afterwards, you're like, fuck, I can go so much faster now.
I wouldn't say so. I think the single solving helps like multiple solving. I don't know if a sprint helps a marathon, not vice versa. So maybe that's not the most accurate analogy.
Yeah, I mean, people can go like pretty stupid when they're trying to train things, and they're like, cool, I need to get better at marathon running, and they'll start doing like all sorts of things that aren't to do with marathon running. You're like, you probably just need to run more. And like usually just doing the actual exercise, that's the thing you want to do, is like the best training of any of your options. But sometimes some things can help that aren't the same. And I was just wondering if like being able to, I just feel like maybe you get better at like holding things in your head and getting like the fastest solve possible per cube just by trying to hold all those things in your head. But maybe not at all. Anyway, interesting. And when you first started to like learning to do it blindfolded, did you need to do a lot of like memory palace style things, or was it something that just came natural from like trying to do the Rubik's Cube so fast anyway? Because with chess grandmasters, they don't necessarily try and learn to be memory champions, but because they spent so much time just watching games and learning things, they kind of just have like a crazy memory. They can actually play chess blindfolded quite easily because they just know the coordinates and how to move things, that they don't actually need to look at the board anymore. And I was just wondering, like, because you solved the Rubik's Cube so much time, did you actually like, not necessarily need to see it because you're just trying to do it so fast, but you're just used to having your eyes on it? Or was it like, I actually need to spend time teaching myself left, bottom, right, etc., in a way that I can like remember it with a memory palace? I'm just intrigued.
I feel like solving a single cube blindfold, you don't actually need a memory palace. I mean, you do need to use, I think, mnemonics and stuff. Like for solving the corners, I'd make images in my head based on the pieces I have to go through. And for the edges, I'd use like sounds. Well, I use some sort of mnemonic technique, and for obviously multiple, I do use memory palace style technique. So I think for like solving multiple cubes blindfold, I mean, you could technically not use like a memory palace. For Rubik's Cube solving, it's kind of like, it's just like your own thing. It's just like more so pure memory. So I think you kind of need the memory palace or some variation of it, solve multiple cubes blindfold. And for like the single cube, it's not as much information. It's like maybe put it in layman's terms, like two mobile phone numbers worth of information. So you can kind of, I think the world top solvers kind of just memorize it as a bunch of letter sound gibberish right now, but that's more a variation of like sounds and images I've mentioned before.
I was just wondering, how can you compress your memory that's required to solve each Rubik's Cube and make it as efficient as possible when you're doing the memory palace? Did it start off like super long-winded, and did it get like shorter and shorter over time?
On average, there are 20 pieces on the Rubik's Cube, so it equates to roughly 20 pieces of information, hence the two mobile phone numbers analogy. That's pretty much the same, like just across all the cubes. There might be slight variations, but that's the average. So you kind of have to have that. You don't have any choice. I think people get faster by just memorizing and getting those 20 bits of information per cube on average into the memory passes quicker. So improving that process, and then like maybe going through and reviewing it later on to sort of reinforce it, like making that process faster. And also when you're solving and recalling information and doing that without pausing so much in the middle. We're not necessarily condensing the information because we can't. I think the current system we have is not really been changed for like years, maybe a decade or something. But I think it's a matter of just inputting and getting the information and getting the information out much faster.
Yeah, definitely is. And I remember I did some like memory stuff for my exams, and like first time I tried to do it, it was absolutely just so long getting it in. But then like once it was in, it was actually really easily. I just had to remember like stupid names of like weird scientists that had written a paper in a different year, just for like, if you wanted to get the highest grade in our exam, you had to know the scientist and the year for any paper that you were referencing in your thing. And you're like, come on, Google, like, why do I need to actually know every single like person? But anyway, after a few months of doing it, I actually got quite quick at remembering it. And it was like, okay, it just takes a lot of work initially. But it didn't really change how I was storing it. It just got really good at doing it. Interesting. So you said like, it's just two phone numbers worth of information to solve a cube. But then once you're doing it, there's a whole other set of memory of like remembering from scratch, like where each one goes and then where it's gone in reference to everything else. Or do you basically, once you've seen a cube, can you just work out what you need to do in order from there? And you don't actually need to like rearrange that memory every single time you move a piece? Because I feel like that's the problem thing that like confuses people when they're doing a Rubik's Cube, is like, you've got the piece there and you need to get it to there, but as you move it there, like everything else changes and you're like, oh shit.
So this goes back down to the blindfolded method specifically as well, because I have a key thing actually to demonstrate this idea. In blindfolded solving, we use a method that only cycles around like a couple pieces or like two pieces at a time early. So if I were to do like under an entire turn like this, and then this, like a lot of pieces are moving. I can't keep track of that. And I'm like literally over and over. So I don't think of it that way. I just think of like certain sequences of moves that I pre-memorized in advance, like before the solve that I've already created in my head. That cycles around certain pieces at a time. So during the actual event or solving, I'm thinking about which pieces I need to move to where. And then when I'm actually solving, then I'm drawing from my long-term memory that I've trained over years in terms of like, okay, if I want to move these three pieces around, I do this. I don't have to think about which moves I have to do. I've already memorized that sequence of moves or algorithm. And then I know if I do that, it will move around like these three pieces. And when you're only moving around a couple pieces like this, rather than like, even like I said before, two turns and like, I don't know, almost half the pieces are different, it's so much easier to keep track of. And that's how people are able to memorize it in like, I don't know, 5 seconds even at like the world's best right now. I'm at some like maybe 7 or 8 at my peak. But that's like, I think the main key. So it's like, we memorize like letters, turn them into sounds and images, like in the spur of the moment during the memorization phase. But sort of long term, like through practicing for like years and stuff, we kind of know how to move those around about affecting the other pieces in the key. So another example would be like this. If you look at it, it's like, this is different, this is different, this is different. Everything else is intact there. So it's way easier to keep track of it.
That's really interesting to observe. Sorry for anyone that's listening that they can't see what happened, but I feel like the actual sound, you still kind of get what you're saying. This made me think, how much time did it take to learn the different sort of stages of like, one, just solving the Rubik's Cube at like a speed that isn't terrible, and then to like getting good at like the hand movements and knowing like the fastest option straight away? Is it sort of like 5 years worth of practice? Was it sort of like 8 hours every day, like half an hour, or like just before you went to bed? Like how much time did you actually put into this to the point where you were from like starting to breaking a world record? If you actually had to work out how many hours.
I started like around the end of 2013. First record was like April 2019, maybe. So it's like maybe 5-ish years or something like that. I think maybe averaged out a couple hours a day or something like that. But I think I had a lot of periods where I kind of went on and off. But I think around 2016, I became a lot more serious. And then that was one couple. Well, I know there was some lunatics I was doing like 8 hours a day instead. I couldn't really be bothered. I think this applies to like a lot of other high performing areas where it's like a Pareto's principle or like deliberate practice where like I think after the first couple of hours, like your performance just kind of deteriorates. And I mean, like obviously if you want to be like the best in the world in a lot of fields, like you have to be obsessed. And I know some people these days, like the guy that now has the national record for blindfolded something who's only 13 years old. I remember the last time I talked to him, I think he was practicing every waking hour after school or something. And maybe he's more competitive now, but at least like during the period when I was sort of like practicing a lot, I think there was like a lot of meta changes going on, a lot of differences in technique. Like when I started, the record was like 23 seconds. Now it's 12 seconds, so literally like half. So I felt like sort of knowing and like leveraging those techniques and just thinking, okay, maybe this is not good, maybe the strategy is better. It's like there's kind of like, directional force rather than just raw hard work, I think was like had a disproportionate amount of importance, I think. But I think maybe once fields get like very optimized and stuff, then maybe it's more just like the hard work, I suppose.
Do you think now that you've done it, you could have been like, right, these were the hours of shitty practice and these are the hours of good practice, and like shaved off like half the time that you practiced to just have worked on like better practice? Or do you think like half the hours where like you weren't necessarily doing it quite so hard were still useful?
I think for the most part, it was mostly just like solving like over and over again. Like maybe there was some other more efficient things I could have done. But I think like at the time when I was doing that, like maybe 2018, 2019, I kind of knew that I was already in a situation where I had an ability to break the world record. I just got a bit lucky. So I was just like, I could learn a bunch of new fancy stuff that would come up in like 1 every 1,000, 10,000 solves, but I don't need to. If I just go to enough competitions and just keep trying and sort of roll a sort of metaphorical dice, then something should happen, which did end up happening 3 times, fortunately. But I think, yeah, maybe earlier on when I was like, when there was like a big meta shifts and like the way people solved it, which was when ties started dropping down drastically, then I think I might have been more focused on learning, which kind of sequences of moves might be better for solving certain cases. But I think, yeah, towards that period of time when I kind of knew I was already at the top, I was like, I might as well just grind and just focus on the pure basics and just doing that well. And it worked.
Very interesting though. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we're faced with a crossroads in life and we don't know which path to take. Whether you're starting a career or changing a career, working out relationships or dealing with ingrained habits. Whatever it is, therapy can help you map out your future and trust yourself to find the way forward. I personally found BetterHelp a godsend to really help me think through my choices and actions at a deeply personal level. And what's great about BetterHelp is that it is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And you can be quickly matched to a licensed therapist, and you're allowed to switch at any time with no extra cost and no questions. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/growth mindset today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/growth mindset. What's the vibe like when you go to the conference competition events for Rubik's Cube things? And who is it generally young males that do these things? Are there many interesting other characters?
Yeah, I'd say it's very predominantly young teens, kids. I think the average age has been kind of going like lower and lower over time. I think someone said it was like 13 or something, which wouldn't surprise me. So it's very much that, more so like introverted kids, the nerdy type. Stereotype's kind of true. Yeah, sort of like that kind of demographic. Probably like maybe more of a similar audience to the type of people you'd see maybe in chess clubs or I don't know. that kind of stuff. The more logic focused people, I suppose.
Are people friendly competitive, or are there like rivalries going on?
Yeah, it's more of a like a friendly, I think, kind of vibe. I think one reason is that it's sort of like a non-profit, so it's like caters more towards kids, teens, like a family kind of vibe. So, but with like 30 kids and stuff, so it's more of like caters towards that kind of audience more so. But yeah, it's quite a friendly kind of vibe. Like it's not like, I don't know, the world record holders or like the champions are like sitting on like the podium far away. They just kind of banter with like people just like everyone else. Although like some people like myself, at least back in 2019, might get asked for like dozens of photos every competition or signatures or signatures. So, but I mean, for the most part, it's kind of like no one's really like above anyone. Even like the world champions, record holders, they help volunteer for the competitions. There's a lot of volunteering going on. So it's more like that kind of, I think, vibe. So it's not really like a traditional, I think, competition in the sense of what people might expect, at least in those typical competitions you see in the videos.
So on other areas of life then, since doing that, like how easily did you find having broken a few world records at 20, then like moving into the other parts of your life? Because it seems like you found some pretty cool things to do.
I think it's been kind of difficult trying to figure out what to do with it exactly. I think my first idea was like, well, I mean, I was like 20 and I was like, oh, okay, I'm an adult now. Holy crap, I need to make the money. So I was like, how can I use my Rubik's Cube skill to do that? So I think one of the ideas was to become like a YouTuber, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And then when I started figuring out what I was doing or like how to be a YouTuber and studying from the people and befriending now the biggest Rubik's Cube YouTuber in the world, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I think I dabbled in trying to teach people, coach people Rubik's Cube solving, but it's more like a hobby and like it's mostly kids and teens in this space. It's not the most monetizable sort of area. I think it's still made like $10,000 off that, so it's not too bad, but definitely nothing like full-time-ish. So I was like, okay, this is really an option. And then I think this is after lockdown, and I think this was on a tangent. One thing I just want to do for like a while, just to help it, just go to a different country, learn a language, or something like that. And I was also interested in the whole digital nomad kind of thing. So I think I just went to Thailand for a couple of months. And yeah, bit of like soul searching. I think I spent more time just like doing random stuff as opposed to like really focusing work. Just tried yoga, Muay Thai. I did the pasta thing you were mentioning before, or 10-day silent meditation retreats. There's a lot of random things. And then I think I was trying to experiment with making content on all the stuff aside from the Rubik's Cube. So I was kind of trying to go a bit broader. So then I was trying to help people get started with video content because I'd made some of the Rubik's Cube stuff when I was a kid. But then I kind of got bored of that. And so more recently I've shifted towards stuff around mindset, or maybe make sort of AI sort of life coach or operating system, because the AI thing's popping off these days. So I've just been kind of all over the place. I haven't exactly figured out what to settle on, but I feel like through this experimentation, I think I'm getting there. But it is kind of weird and sort of interesting. And I think one thing I think about, maybe it's unique to me and like don't really think about everyone else, but I think maybe a lot of people, at least around this age, and maybe just getting started with the careers, have gone out of university, they haven't really made a name for themselves or gotten anything. But I feel like I've kind of done that already at 20, and I'm like 24. So it's like, I don't feel the need to do that anymore. So it's like, it's almost as if I'm climbing the second milestone of, instead of the first battle of just like achievement and stuff, it's the second milestone of how do I do stuff that I like and be happy and things like that.
Which is the only important mountain anyway. You need to go to the first one and realize that it's not important before you start climbing the second one. But it's easy to say, but but no one's ever going to learn it without doing it. But one thing I certainly felt, well, quite a few things actually I felt related to whilst you were talking there was, one, I found that I've often wanted to do something, worked out how to do it eventually after putting lots of time and effort into it, and then realized that I don't want to do it. And there's so many things in life where I'm like, yeah, this will be cool. And then you actually get there, you're like, this sucks. Like, why do people do this? This is so boring. And that is a problem. But I think that's the beauty of just trying different things. I like to sort of, the concept of like dating ideas, because you don't really know what you like until you've tried different things, and you just have to try different lifestyles. And I think, yeah, we were talking on your Twitter the other day around the concept of like just living in different places, trying different sort of jobs, and like the optimal search theory for like choosing a life partner or anything is like, however much time you want to do that, say you want to be married by 30, the first 37% of that time should be like just sampling things and just sort of having different sorts of relationships with different sorts of people. And then after the 37% amount of your time, you should then take the next best one that you find that is better than everything you've already tried so far, having had all your experience. And it's a really good approach for opening your mind. Because a lot of people like, I don't live in America and don't even live in America. And they're like, it's the best country in the world. And you're like, it's got a lot of problems. It's not the best. I mean, okay, geographically speaking, it does have like everything you might need, and it might be like the best in terms of money made through tech, but it's not necessarily the nicest country, and you need to try living in some other countries first, and maybe you'll still come back because of your family there or whatever. But like, I think when you're young, you have no idea what's best, so you should try stuff. So it's nice that you're just doing different things and experimenting. But yeah, like half of me is like, okay, you've worked out what sounds like the correct thing to do logically for anyone, but you have a very unique situation around having already broken world records and done stuff pretty cool by the time you're 20. When you're in your 20s, you're basically 21 is a 0-year-old adult as far as I'm concerned. And you're like, people have so much expectations on themselves to do like really cool shit in their 20s. And you're like, just have fun. You don't need to be like a billionaire or a millionaire or anything by the time that you're 30. You just need to have done some stuff to give yourself some life experiences to maybe give yourself a better chance of doing something that you actually want to do for 10 or 20 years afterwards. Because if you're in your 30s, you're then like still struggling and then you just don't like your job or anything and you have like midlife crises and things, like it's a bit more of a waste of your time. And for most people, you're not actually going to earn that much money when you're 20, and you may as well spend more of that money. Like all the advice for like start your retirement fund and everything like straight away is like, yeah, sure, investing, but like actually you can earn so much more money in your 30s and 40s. I've had 10 years experience in like product and like podcasting and things. I was just looking at a job at Apple as like a product manager in podcasting for like 250K. And I'm like, I couldn't have got that job 10 years ago, but now I can. You can't earn that as a 20-year-old. So you don't need to like necessarily spend all of your time trying to save some extra money this year for have like a few extra K, because of it's not actually going to make that much difference to you when you can just earn like 10 times more of it later. You may as well like spend it. I figured. Anyway, so of the different things that you went and did that you experimented with, which one was your favorite if you had to pick one and was the most useful for you as an experience?
I mean, like at least in the digital space, I still think just like experimenting with making like content on like other topics outside of Rubik's Cube solving, because I think it sort of just helped me just figure out what I like talking about and what other people resonate with, and maybe I could do something to sort of monetize that. I think that align, but that's something I kind of maybe sort of expected that I'd be able to sort of do well. I think in terms of like, yeah, maybe more towards the physical world and stuff, I'm thinking about that silence and meditation retreat for like 10 days. I mean, I wasn't like enlightened or anything at the end, but it just made me realize how hypothetical future obsessed I am in my mind. Like 90% of the time, I'm just like thinking like, I want to go here, I want to do this, da, 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 da. But it's like, I feel like I focus so much on the future and I'm not doing anything in the present that it's like, I'm just making my chances of achieving that future vision like even less. That was sort of counterintuitive. I also remember there was this moment, I think in day 9, having it happen day 5 as well, where I just inexplicably just felt like ridiculously happy. Most people know me as like just being like really chill. I just like barely react to things at all. Like somebody literally got murdered like 2 blocks away and I'm just like, oh, okay, that sucks.
I struggle with these things too. Like, I think why I like my girlfriend is that she's the opposite. She feels all the emotions. I'm just like, I'm pretty checked out for most things as well.
Yeah, it's not a half bad mentality to have. But I remember, yeah, there were 2 moments during our retreat where I went from like a perpetual 7 out of 10, like a 9 out of 10, or like maybe even higher, where I just felt just so happy. I just wanted to wish everyone like a good day for an important life. If I could access Instagram, I would just out of like just pure, just like myself. Just I just want to like, I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a lovely. I never think like that normally, so I found that really fascinating. And I was just like, is this how I am just like normally, just with myself about the judgment of other people? And it's like, should I carry this onto my life just more in general? I think I maybe made it exactly a proactive decision to do that or something, but I think maybe as a result of that experience, maybe I just sort of carried like a bit of that still with me to this day.
I also did some yoga camps and some like Thai kickboxing for my time in Asia and the Vipassana. And I definitely think that was by far the most life-changing experience in terms of, one, as you said, like the 10 days just observing your mind and actually just seeing how your mind works and being like, I am way more crazy than I like to believe. It just really humbles yourself a bit more. And you're just way more aware of your ego and also way better at being empathy and realizing that sometimes you might be a dick and that like you can be nicer to people and like all the different things that, yeah, just made me really, really happy. Overall, on the topic of then opportunities in AI then and self-discovery and how to help other people do useful stuff. Where's your brain at with that? It seems to be really interesting you. And so far you've been pretty good selector of things that are interesting. So hopefully you keep the hits coming.
I just have so different interests that it's like, I kind of want to put all of that random expertise into something that's like useful, like one thing that's useful, but it's like kind of hard, but like I want to keep sort of pivoting. One idea I had recently, like last week, was the idea of like maybe some sort of like AI life coach or like some sort of like operating system. Cause like I have like a crap load of ideas just like hovering on my head and I struggle like do things. So it's like, why don't I just outsource all that to like AI? Or maybe AI could sort of help me sort of figure out which of those ideas like useful and like execute it. And I'm pretty sure it's like, yeah, it's very possible to sort of do this. I always say if it can sort of help me with like basically every area of my life, then it's like, oh, this is probably pretty valuable. And then maybe I could help people with it as well.
I don't know how that can necessarily work with GPT around like, well, AI in general for stuff, but I definitely think it's really good for just helping you ask questions when you use it correctly. Basically, if you think of your brain is thinking stuff and questions just direct what it is that you think about. And so like the stuff that's in front of you that you miss all the time, but like the right question will bring the right things into focus. And all that you ever think about is basically guided by like the different things that you sort of ask yourself or get asked each day to then talk about. Like an interview, everything that's said in an interview is guided by the questions that get asked, for example, and that makes the interview interesting or not interesting. Like a therapy session is just like someone asking you the right questions to help you get the insights that you're looking for. And a good coach that's going to get you to business success is just basically asking you the right questions to help you realize the things that you need to work out, even though like you technically have all the knowledge in front of you already. It's just helping the right pieces of knowledge come into focus. So if you can make GPT just a much better coach and questioner to like just work the things out for you to what you should be doing, it's okay. This has been fun. So a few questions that I have are, what was one of your earliest memories?
Oh, this is interesting. This is like in my dreams. I think I was at McDonald's or something. I think I was at the counter and then I walked into this other room and then it just suddenly got like really big, like in a church where the ceiling is really high. And a bunch of workers with these ladders leaning against some of these pillars. And all of a sudden some earthquake happened. Everyone just sort of fell off and started dying or something like that. That's kind of depressing now to think about it. I think they were dying. I don't remember. It was like an earthquake and things started pulling down. I don't remember what happened after that, but that's my first memory. It's not even in real life.
What's one of the kindest things that someone has done for you?
Just my dad says like working behind the scenes to sort of give me like a good life. I think childhood and all that, generally speaking. I feel like expresses it sort of like upfront directly, but I know he does like a lot of stuff behind the scenes, like in a show, someone's just like revealing the props around or helping you do X, Y, Z. So kind of like that person. He doesn't really express it explicitly, like openly, like here in Blindfolded, where everyone's like kind of kissing each other on the parks. But I do like know he's done a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So I'd say that it's not like a particular moment, but maybe a consistent collection of those moments over time. And it's something I think I appreciate every year as I grow older.
Do you think he set a good example for you of how you want to be as a father?
I think there are a lot of traits. I think, yes. There are certain things I would maybe do a bit differently, like maybe be more open to sort of like maybe emotional sort of conversations, but I understand it's like a cultural, generational difference, Asian background, etc. But I think I'd keep a lot of traits like around like hard work, discipline, being happy is important, that kind of stuff. So
I think I'd say the same things. As in, I really like reading books that cover like multiple generations. I don't know if you read like Pachinko. That was a super good one. There's a few others, but that one's a super nice book. It's about some North Koreans that moved to Japan at the end of the World War, but then like they say there, but like the struggles that one generation faces that are like life and death for the next generation, just like, what the fuck, I don't give a shit. And then like, but they'll get depressed and like have some epic crazy stuff going on that like the next generation again are just like, leave me alone. And then it's really beautiful, but slightly depressing at the same time. But it's a nice book. I'm not sure that I was necessarily the best at talking about emotions, but I don't think my parents necessarily helped me as much as like my sister was a bit more open about it. But I would still say as a family, we don't necessarily talk about difficult things and stuff, which I think is slightly British as well. I was talking to an American the other day who started dating a British girl and he's like, she can't talk about her emotions. She's constantly making jokes and things. And like in Britain, we definitely do value humor as like affection and love and sort of recognition. And like my girlfriend will call me and be like, oh, I just called to say I love you. And I'm like, you sound like a stalker. And I think I'm being funny. And she's like, why are you saying this? That's horrible. And I should probably get better at being like, oh, I love you too. This is lovely. Because It's not so natural for me. But that was an insight. Okay, cool. This was lovely. Super nice to have you on. Glad that we got around to this eventually. But yeah, it was super fascinating to learn everything about Rubik's Cubes and mindset and how to approach life as a young person. I'm sure you're going to do some pretty cool things.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, looking forward to hearing what happens over the next few years. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Jack Cai. If you're interested to hear more from him, then you can follow his YouTube or his TikTok or X account where he posts daily by searching for Jack Cai Rubik's Cube. And also stay tuned for the next episode of the show where Jack will be interviewing me about some of my own lessons in mindset, entrepreneurship, nomadism, and success in the creative fields. Besides running this podcast, I've also ran a podcast tech platform with over 80,000 podcast hosts and may have learned a few things. I've also worked with quite a few YouTubers with over 1 million subscribers and spent a year inside the BBC offices working on the emotional analysis and optimization of their content. So, yep, stay tuned for that next week. And back to this episode, I just had to say that it was such a blast and an epic reminder of the importance of the growth mindset. I love the fact that Jack deliberately chose to go into blindfolded Rubik's Cubes, which is just conventionally much harder to solve than a normal Rubik's Cube, but it was where the value lay in the opportunities for success. And that's just such a big lesson for all of us. And I really hope that that does develop your affinity to go and do hard things and love challenges. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who you think deserves to take on some bigger challenges and could do some cool things with their life, because I'm sure you know some people that could achieve some nutty things if they put their mind to it. Of course, I am a podcaster, YouTuber person that does love it when people subscribe to my show and like my content or perhaps leave me some comments, because it's a crazy world out there and I'm just trying to get some love. But if that's too much for you, don't worry about it. I'll be back here next week with more content, as you already know, because I've mentioned that. But in the meantime, do remember that life is to be enjoyed, and that does start with enjoying today. Enjoyment is not something to put off for the future. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.